The phone buzzed against the bottom of my beach bag for the 9th time before I even looked at it. I didn't need to. I already knew the shape of that buzzing, short, insistent, 3 seconds apart, the rhythm of someone who believes that if they just call enough times, the universe will rearrange itself around their convenience. My mother's name sat on the screen the first time I checked. By the 5th call, it was my sister. By the 12th, both of them, taking turns, like a relay race nobody had asked them to run. I was 340 miles from whatever was happening on the other end of that phone, sitting on a faded gingham blanket with sand working its way into the waistband of my shorts, watching my son interrogate a hermit crab he'd named Brian. My daughter was knee-deep in the surf, arms out for balance, shrieking every time a wave hit higher than she expected. The sun was doing the thing it does in late June on the Georgia coast, turning everything gold at the edges, and for the first time in 4 years, I wasn't doing math in my head about who owed what to whom. That peace lasted about as long as it takes a debit card to get declined twice in a hotel lobby 2 states away. I didn't know that yet, not the details, not the part where my sister would scream at a front desk clerk loud enough to make a man in a golf shirt pull his kids closer, not the part where my mother would sit down hard on a concrete bench because her legs simply stopped agreeing to hold her up. All I knew, sitting on that blanket with sand in my shoes and sunscreen on my hands, was that 22 missed calls is not a number people reach by accident. 22 is a number you reach when something has gone very wrong, and you've decided it's someone else's job to fix it. I'll tell you exactly how we got there, but you have to go back further than the beach. You have to go back to a hospital room, a manila envelope, and a man who knew exactly which of his daughters he could trust with a checkbook. Welcome back. I'm Renata, 34, a bookkeeper for a small animal veterinary practice outside a town you've never heard of, the kind of place where the gas station doubles as the only place to get a decent breakfast biscuit. This is the story of how my family decided my bank account was a shared resource, and what happened the one summer I quietly decided it wasn't. If you've ever been the one who kept the lights on while everyone else spent the bulb money, stay through this one. It gets good. My job is not glamorous. I want to say that up front, because people hear bookkeeper and imagine something dustier than it is. I sit in a back office that smells faintly of antiseptic and dog shampoo, and I make sure the numbers at Dr. Ackhaffer's clinic match the numbers in real life. Invoices, payroll, the slow, unglamorous churn of inventory for flea medication and surgical thread. I am good at it in the specific way that quiet, careful people are good at things nobody throws parades for. Numbers don't perform for you. They don't cry at the right moment to get what they want. They just sit there, true, waiting for you to add them up correctly. I have 2 kids. Mia is 8, sharp-tongued in the way only a kid raised mostly by one parent learns to be, with her father's calm brown eyes and absolutely none of his follow-through, since he left when she was 4 and hasn't been seen since except as a name on paperwork. Theo is 5, missing a front tooth, obsessed with anything that lives in sand or water, currently convinced that hermit crabs can be trained like dogs if you're patient enough. My mornings are a clock I could recite blind. Up at 5:40, 2 lunches packed, one with the crusts cut off because Theo has opinions about crusts, out the door, drop off, work, pick up, dinner, bath, books, bed. Repeat until the calendar runs out. I kept a budget. Still do. A spreadsheet with more columns than it probably needs, because once you've watched what happens to a family when nobody tracks anything, you don't go back to guessing. I set aside a little every month into an account I didn't let myself touch. A travel fund, I called it, though for years it just sat there collecting dust and the occasional $20, a promise to myself I wasn't sure I believed yet. Here's something I learned slowly, the way you learn anything that costs you. In some families, being careful with money doesn't make you respected. It makes you useful. There's a difference, and the difference is everything. My father understood that difference better than anyone. Walter Cole spent 40 years as an electrician, the kind of man whose hands were permanently nicked and calloused, who could rewire a panel blind but couldn't tell you the plot of a movie he'd seen twice. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. When he had something to say, it landed like a dropped tool, sudden, and you felt it. 4 years ago, he was in a hospital bed with a heart that had quietly been failing for longer than any of us knew, tubes running into both arms, looking smaller in that gown than I'd ever seen him look in 40 years of overalls. My sister Carmen and I stood on either side of the bed like the world's most mismatched bookends. He looked past her. He looked at me. "Renata, you're going to need to handle things." He didn't mean comfort. He meant logistics, the life insurance, my mother's accounts, the bills that came due whether or not anyone felt like dealing with them. He had a nurse bring in an envelope from his truck, manila, soft at the corners from however long it had been riding around under his seat. Inside, the policy. My mother's bank information, written out in block capitals because that's how electricians write, careful and square, like the letters themselves had to pass inspection. A list of monthly bills. "Keep the lights on for your mama," he said. "That's all I'm asking." I took the envelope. My hands were not steady, his were. Carmen watched from the window the entire time and said nothing in the room. She waited until we were alone in the elevator, the two of us riding down in fluorescent silence, before she said it. Quiet, flat, no real heat in it yet, just the first crack in something that would take years to fully break. "Guess he finally picked a favorite." I didn't argue. There wasn't a version of that conversation that ended anywhere good, and besides, we both knew the truth sitting underneath her sentence. Carmen had bounced 2 checks to the power company that same year. She'd borrowed $3,000 from our father 18 months earlier for a car repair and never mentioned it again, the way you don't mention a debt you've privately decided doesn't count. Dad loved her exactly as much as he loved me. He just didn't trust her with a checkbook, and there's no kind way to communicate that to a person, so he didn't try. He just handed the envelope to the one who'd give it back the way he left it. He died 11 weeks later, on a Thursday, with rain coming down hard enough that the funeral home's gutters overflowed onto the sidewalk during the service. The life insurance paid out $62,000. I sat at my kitchen table that week with a legal pad and a calculator and did precisely what he'd asked. Medical debt first. The hospital had a way of finding you even after someone was gone. Then the roof on my mother's house, which had been threatening to give for 2 winters. A new water heater, because the old one was being held together by faith alone. What was left, I put into a savings account in my mother's name and told myself, untouchable, emergency only. After that came the $300 a month. First of every month, like a second rent, except the thing I was renting was my mother's ability to keep her lights on and her prescriptions filled. Because $1,400 of Social Security stretches a lot further on paper than it does against a mortgage-free house with an aging roof and a body that needs 4 medications a month. Carmen contributed nothing. "I've got my own family to think about," she told me once, with the specific weariness of a woman who drove a leased SUV and had a pool service on retainer. Her family, by every visible measure, seemed to be doing just fine thinking about itself. But Carmen had something I didn't leverage, in the shape of 2 kids. Sophie and Dylan were my mother's only other grandchildren, and Carmen understood, with the precision of someone who'd never once balanced a budget but somehow always understood power, exactly what those 2 kids were worth as currency. "If you keep having Renata's kids over every weekend, I'm not bringing mine," she told our mother once, the way you'd mention a change in the weather. My mother adjusted accordingly. I found out only because Mia asked, with the wounded specificity of an 8-year-old keeping score. Why Grandma only seemed to want them on Wednesdays now. I didn't have an answer that wouldn't have made things worse, so I just adjusted the schedule and kept sending the $300, because by then it had stopped feeling like a choice and started feeling like a debt I'd inherited along with the envelope. Every summer since I was small, our family went to the coast. Same stretch of beach, different rental house most years, but always sand and salt and a weekwear. For once, nobody talked about money because Dad had already handled it. After he died, the trip should have died quietly with him. I didn't let it. Mia loved the tide pools too much. Theo's first trip had been at 10 months old, and he'd eaten more sand than food and cried when we packed up to leave. I couldn't be the one who ended it. So I kept it going. I booked the rooms. I planned the meals. Last year, it was 2 rooms at a little place on the coast, 4 nights, just under $2,000 total. I covered most of it. Carmen sent her share 2 months late after I'd asked 3 separate times. My mother contributed nothing and apologized for nothing, and I told myself it didn't matter, because it was for the kids, which is the sentence you say to yourself right before you realize you've been quietly footing a bill nobody else considers a bill. This year, my sister had other ideas, and those ideas started, as so many bad ones do, in a driveway, with a man who'd been carrying a grudge since I'd told him no. 3 months before summer, on a flat gray Thursday, Brandon Hale, Carmen's ex-husband, divorced 2 years but still close enough to make custody handoffs in her driveway most weeks, leaned against the bed of his pickup, with the particular satisfaction of a man rehearsing a complaint he'd been saving up. "You know your sister turned me down for that loan," he said. He'd asked me for $5,000 the previous fall to start a side business installing flooring. I'd said no, politely, clearly, once, and he had clearly filed that no away somewhere it could fester. Carmen folded her arms. "She's tight, always has been." Brandon glanced toward the house. "Your mom's still on her account, right? Authorized user." There was a pause. I wasn't there, but I've since heard the shape of it secondhand. The kind of pause that means a person is doing quiet math with their conscience and not liking the answer they're arriving at. "She does owe this family," Carmen finally said. That's the sentence that started everything. Not a plan exactly, more like a permission slip Carmen signed for herself, alone, in a driveway, while I was 3 towns over helping my daughter with multiplication tables, completely unaware that my name had just been attached to a debt I hadn't agreed to. The first real sign came at my niece Sophie's 10th birthday in April, dogwoods blooming, a hand-lettered banner sagging slightly over the porch. I brought cupcakes. Mia carried the box like it was a sacred object. Theo carried a gift bag with a watercolor set he'd picked out himself. The party was fine for almost an hour. Then Carmen pulled me into the kitchen, closed the door halfway, and leaned against the counter with her arms crossed. The posture of a woman who has already decided something and is only informing you of it, not discussing it. "We're doing Hilton Head this year. Me, Mom, the kids." I waited. "Your kids aren't coming. Mine don't want them there." I looked past her shoulder into the living room, where my mother was standing by the couch holding something between 2 fingers. My debit card, the emergency one I'd left with her 2 years earlier, for groceries, for a doctor's visit, for the kind of small thing that shouldn't require a phone call. "Why do you have my card, Mom?" She looked at Carmen first, then at me, the way a person looks for permission to answer a question honestly. Carmen said she needed it for the booking. I nodded once, said keep it, called my kids, picked up the cupcake box, and left. That drive home was quiet. Mia, 2 blocks from the apartment, finally asked why we'd left early. "Sometimes adults need space, baby," I told her, and she accepted it the way kids accept most things filed away for later, to be pulled out at a cost I couldn't yet calculate. That night I opened my banking app for the first time in weeks with real attention instead of habit. A $400 withdrawal I hadn't made. When I'd asked my mother about it a month earlier, she'd claimed she used the wrong card at the pharmacy, promised to pay it back. I dug further and found 3 more gas, a big box store, a restaurant I'd never set foot in, all in the weeks before the party. I called the bank the next morning to remove the authorized user. Both parties present, or a notarized request, 7 to 10 business days. I didn't have 7 to 10 days of patience left in me. So I drove to a different bank across town, opened a new checking and savings account, and moved everything, every dollar of the travel fund, every dollar of my actual checking balance, out from under anyone's fingers but mine. I left $12.30 in the old account. I told no one. Here's what I've learned about family and money. The moment someone starts treating your card like it belongs to them, they've stopped keeping you safe and started keeping you close, which are not the same thing, no matter how similar they sound from the outside. If you've ever had to quietly move your money just to protect your own peace, you already know exactly where this story is headed. Drop a comment, I read every one. 2 weeks later, Sunday dinner. Fried chicken, green beans from a can, the kind of meal that asks nothing of anyone. Carmen had the look of someone who'd gotten what she wanted and needed an audience for it. She pulled out her phone before the plates were even cleared and turned the screen toward our mother. A resort, white balconies, a pool the color of mouthwash, the kind of photos designed to be scrolled through slowly. 4 nights, ocean view, kids club included, 3,200 total. She scrolled like she was selling timeshares. Then she looked across the table at me, the look landing somewhere between pity and satisfaction. You can't afford it anyway. Theo, beside me, looked up from his mashed potatoes. Are we going to the beach too, Mommy? The table went still in that particular way tables go still, when a kid has just said the thing the adults were all carefully avoiding. We're going to have our own adventure, buddy, I told him, and squeezed his shoulder, and he went back to his potatoes, satisfied, the way 5-year-olds are mercifully easy to satisfy. I didn't give Carmen the argument she wanted. I washed the dishes. I drove my kids home. And at a red light on the way, I opened my phone and typed, "Family beach vacation, away from the crowds." By 11 that night, kids asleep, coffee gone cold beside me, I'd found it a little inn on a quieter stretch of coast, nothing fancy, the kind of place my father would have picked without a second thought. $89 a night, 4 nights. I ran the numbers the way I run everything, line by line, until the total sat clean and certain in front of me, just over $1,000 all in. My new account had enough. I booked it. The confirmation landed in my inbox 12 seconds later. I screenshotted it, saved it to a folder labeled, simply *beach. I wrote nothing on the family group chat. I wrote a single word on a sticky note and stuck it to my fridge. Beach. No dates. No location. I know exactly how fast information travels in my family, and I had no intention of feeding it. What I didn't know yet, wouldn't know for weeks, until a friend from church who happens to know everybody told me everything over lemonade, was the shape of what Carmen had actually built behind that resort photo. She'd booked 2 oceanfront rooms in early April, $800 down on her own credit card, $2,400 more due 3 days before check-in. She had no intention of covering that remainder herself. Renata's card will cover the rest, she told our mother on the phone. She owes us. Years of acting like Dad's money was hers to control. My mother, by every account, hesitated, asked if that was really right, was told the card had been left in her care and that leaving it counted as permission. It did not. Leaving an emergency card with your mother in case she needs gas money is not the same as handing over a blank check for a beach resort. But Carmen had already decided what the card meant, and our mother had already decided it wasn't worth the fight required to argue otherwise. Brandon texted Carmen that night, smart, she won't know till it's too late. Carmen sent back a thumbs up. $2,400, due in a matter of weeks. Charged to a card connected to an account holding $12.30. They didn't know that part yet. I did. May moved fast at the clinic. Allergy season means every dog in 3 counties is scratching itself raw, and Dr. Ackhaffer was booked solid for weeks. I liked it that way. Busy hours move quicker than slow ones, and I had less room in my head to dwell on a phone that hadn't stopped lighting up with Carmen's name on the family thread. Photos of pools and seafood towers and a dolphin cruise she'd apparently added without consulting anyone. Captioned. * putting this on the same card too. I didn't reply. I opened my banking app instead, checked the old account out of pure curiosity. $12.30, exactly where I'd left it. My sister was about to try to charge a $480 dinner cruise to an account that couldn't buy a tank of gas, and she had absolutely no idea. I finished my sandwich. Turkey on wheat, same as every Tuesday. Went back to the payroll spreadsheet. Found an error in column B in under 6 minutes. Numbers I could always fix. Family, apparently you just had to let run its own course and watch what it cost the people who'd built it that way. That same week, I found something I'd forgotten existed. A shoebox on the top shelf of the hall closet, my father's, dusty, the leather faded at the corners. Inside, his union card, an old photo of him and my mother at the coast decades ago, both of them young and squinting into the sun, and an envelope with my name on it in his block capital handwriting. He'd given it to me at the hospital, tucked inside the larger envelope, and I'd been too raw, too busy, too tired in the years since to ever open it. I sat on the closet floor and read it. 7 sentences. No lecture, no guilt. Just a man who knew both his daughters well enough to love them differently because they were different, and who'd apparently known, even then, even from a hospital bed, exactly how this would all eventually play out. Don't let anyone turn your kindness into a key to your wallet, he'd written. If the day comes when helping them hurts you, stop. Take your bobbies to the beach. I folded it back along its original creases and slid it behind my driver's license, where I'd feel its edge every time I reached for a card. Then I got up and started packing. The card declined at exactly 10 the next morning. I learned about it the same way I learned about everything else that summer, secondhand, weeks later, except this time the timeline mattered enough that someone gave me the hour. The resort system ran the remaining charge automatically. $2,400, card ending in whatever 4 digits my old account still carried, the one with $12.30 sitting in it like a small, stubborn insult. Declined. Insufficient funds. An automated email went out to the address on the reservation, Carmen's inbox, subject line clean and bloodless, payment declined. Action required. 48 hours to provide an alternative method, or the booking would cancel and the $800 deposit would simply disappear, the way deposits do. Carmen called our mother at 10:16. Renata's card got declined. My mother, by every account I later heard, sounded genuinely confused, the particular confusion of someone whose script has stopped matching the scene. It's right here in my purse. Try it again. Go to an ATM. Check it. So she drove to the bank, parked badly, walked in, fed the card into the machine, and watched a number appear that made no sense against everything she'd been told. $12. She called Carmen from the lobby, voice gone small. There's only $12 in here. The pause on the other end lasted long enough that my mother checked the screen a second time, as if the machine might apologize and correct itself. That's not possible, Carmen said. She puts money in there every month. Well, it's not in here now. I wasn't on that call. I was at my desk entering a payment for a dog's dental cleaning, and I felt nothing happen, because nothing had not yet. The only thing that happened on my end was that my phone buzzed 20 minutes later with Carmen's name on it, and I let it ring through to voicemail while I finished the entry. The column balanced on the first try. I remember that more clearly than I remember much else from that week. The small, private satisfaction of numbers doing exactly what they were supposed to do, while somewhere 200 miles north, a much bigger number was refusing to. 48 hours. That's what the clock said, and Carmen spent the first several of them doing math out loud to anyone who'd listen. She opened her credit app and found $1,200 of room left on a card with a $3,000 limit. She needed $2,400. She called Brandon first, because asking him was easier than asking herself how she'd gotten here. Can you front me $1,200? He laughed, not cruelly, just genuinely caught off guard. I don't have that kind of cash sitting around. Ask your mom. So she did. My mother stood in her own living room, under my father's portrait, the one that had hung over the television since the funeral, and said the only thing she had left to say. That money's for emergencies. This is * an emergency. It's a vacation, Carmen. But she went to the bank anyway, the way she always eventually did. Withdrew $600 from the account I'd built for her, the one I'd specifically marked, in my own head if nowhere else, as untouchable. The teller asked cash or check. She said cash, drove it to Carmen's house in an envelope like it was something shameful, which by then it probably was. Carmen scraped the last $600 off her own card, maxing it completely, and sent $1,200 through the resort's payment portal. $1,200 against a $2,400 bill, still short by half, clock at 31 hours and counting. She called me again that evening. I was giving Theo his bath, a plastic shark floating belly up near the faucet, bubbles climbing his chin. My phone lit up on the bathroom counter, Carmen, and I let it sit there and ring itself out. A text arrived 2 minutes later. I know you moved your money. We need to talk. I read it once, set the phone face down on the counter, picked the shark book off the shelf and read Theo 3 chapters. He fell asleep somewhere around the part with the whale, and I sat there a while longer than I needed to, listening to him breathe, before I finally turned the light off. The knock came the next evening, a little after 8:40. I knew who it was before I even reached the door. There's a particular weight to Carmen's knock when she's arriving with a grievance instead of a greeting. She stood on my welcome mat in yoga pants and a wrinkled shirt, mascara smudged under one eye like she hadn't bothered to check a mirror before driving over. I opened the door but didn't step back. My body filled the frame. What did you do with the money? She said it like someone who already knows the answer and just wants to watch you squirm while you confirm it. My money, I said, keeping my voice level, is in my account, just not the one you were planning to spend without asking. Her chin jerked like I'd flicked it. Spend? Mom's an authorized user, that's not stealing. Then why didn't anyone ask me? Silence. The porch light buzzed overhead. A moth bounced off the bulb twice and gave up. We need that money, she said. The kids are counting on it. Your kids, I said. Not mine, you made that part very clear. She shifted her weight, glanced past me into the apartment like she was calculating whether she could talk her way further in. Then her voice softened, dropped into the register she uses when force hasn't worked and she's trying something gentler. I'm sorry about what I said. Can you help for Mom? I let the apology sit in the air for a second, the way you'd let a bad check sit on a counter before deciding whether to even bother depositing it. You told my daughter she wasn't real family. We're done here. I stepped back, closed the door, turned the deadbolt loud enough that she'd hear it land. Through the front window, I watched her stand on the mat, the one Mia had picked out herself, yellow letters spelling out welcome asterisk, for a good 10 seconds before she kicked it sideways and walked back to her car. The clinic's office phone rang at 9:15 the next morning, not my cell, the actual landline, the one reserved for emergencies, because you can't ignore a ringing phone at a vet clinic. The number on the display was my mother's house. She knew exactly what she was doing. Renata, can't you just put the money back? For the family. Through the glass partition, I could see Dr. Akefer examining a tabby with an ear infection, the cat sitting unbothered on the exam table, calmer than I felt holding that receiver. Mom, you let her use a card you knew wasn't yours to give. You told me my kids weren't welcome on this trip. That was Carmen's idea. I just went along. That's the problem. You always just go along. I heard her breath catch on the other end. I didn't mean for it to get like this. But it did. She started crying, and I know my mother's 2 registers of crying well enough by now to tell them apart on sound alone. There's the real one, quiet and involuntary. And there's the performance, which arrives in slightly too perfect intervals, like punctuation. This was the second kind. I waited her out, didn't fill the silence, didn't offer a solution. The old version of me would have already folded by this point in the call, already said, let me see what I can do asterisk, already be mentally drafting the transfer I'd regret by the weekend. That version of me wasn't on the phone anymore. Your father would be so disappointed in you, she finally said. The card she'd been saving, the one meant to make me crumble on contact. Dad told me to stop when helping started hurting, I said. I stopped. The line went dead. I hung up the receiver, finished the stack of invoices in front of me, fed the clinic's resident cat her 3:30 meal exactly on schedule, the way I did every day, because some things in my life were still allowed to be simple. After work, I stopped at the grocery store for milk and bread, and ran into Ruth Patterson in the cereal aisle, comparing 2 boxes of oatmeal like one of them owed her money. I heard about the trip, she said, setting both boxes down. Mom told you. She asked me to talk to you. I told her no. Ruth folded her arms, not aggressively, just settled, the posture of a woman about to say something true and wanting you to stand still long enough to hear it. I was at the birthday party. I saw your sister pull you into that kitchen. I saw your mother holding that card like it was hers to hold. You don't owe anyone anything, Renata. I know, I said. Your daddy would say the same. No speech behind it, no big production. Ruth had known my father 30 years, had served with him on the same church committee, and he'd fixed her garbage disposal twice and never once let her pay him for it. She didn't need to explain what she meant by invoking him. I already understood. She squeezed my hand, quick and firm, the way you'd pull someone across a ditch, then picked up the cheaper oatmeal and dropped it in her cart. Have a good summer, honey. That was the whole conversation. No therapy session, no reconciliation plan, just a woman in a grocery store who'd seen exactly what happened and decided to say so out loud. I drove home, sat in the car a minute with the engine off and told myself, pack tonight, leave tomorrow. I loaded the car in 4 trips that night. Cooler on the back floor, sandwiches wrapped in foil, juice boxes, grapes in a bag. Beach towels from the linen closet, the big striped ones. Theo's shark goggles sitting on top of everything in a plastic bag so he'd see them first thing in the morning. I checked the confirmation one more time, the room number, the check-in time, and wrote the confirmation code on a sticky note tucked into my wallet, because I don't trust a phone battery when it actually matters. 4 missed calls from Carmen, 2 from my mother. I let the notifications sit there, unread, unanswered, and poured myself a glass of lemonade instead. Sat on the porch steps in the quiet, a sprinkler clicking somewhere down the block, a neighbor's porch light, the kind of silence that doesn't ask anything of you. Tomorrow I'd be driving south with the windows down, and my kids singing off-key to whatever came on the radio, and none of those 4 missed calls would matter even a little. I opened my wallet. My father's letter sat folded behind my license. I didn't read it. I already knew every word. I finished the lemonade and went to bed. The same day, around 2 in the afternoon, 250 miles north, Carmen's SUV pulled into the resort's parking lot after a 4-hour drive. My mother sat in the passenger seat, knees stiff from sitting too long. Sophie and Dylan pressed their faces to the windows in the back, already shouting about the pool. Carmen walked into the lobby with sunglasses pushed up on her head and a rolling suitcase trailing behind her, the posture of a woman expecting good news. The front desk clerk, young in a blue polo, typed her name in, typed it again, frowned at the screen. I'm showing a remaining balance of $2,400. We received a partial payment of $1,200 yesterday, but full payment is required at check-in. You're still short $1,200. Carmen slid her credit card across the counter anyway, like confidence alone might override the limit sitting on it. The clerk swiped it, waited. I'm sorry, ma'am, declined. Sophie appeared at her mother's elbow. Mom, what's happening? Where's our room? Not now, Sophie. Carmen grabbed our mother's arm and pulled her past the brochure rack toward the hallway. Call Renata, now. My mother's hands shook, the real kind, not the performance kind, as she dialed. I was already 200 miles south by then, in a place none of them knew the name of yet. We'd checked into our room around noon. Small, clean, smelling faintly of salt air and lemon cleaner, 2 beds and a kitchenette and a screen door opening onto a narrow porch. Theo had his shoes off before I'd finished unloading the car. Mia stood at the door in her swimsuit, towel slung over one shoulder, vibrating with the specific impatience only an 8-year-old near an ocean can produce. By 1 we were on the sand. Mia ran straight for the waves, laughing the particular laugh kids reserve for water that's new every single time no matter how many times they've seen it. Theo dropped to his knees and started digging, deeply committed to a hole whose purpose changed every few minutes depending on his mood. I sat on the blanket, sun on my arms, the ocean doing its slow, indifferent breathing in front of us. This is it, I remember thinking. This is the actual trip. My phone rang at 2:15. Mom. I looked at the screen, looked at Mia jumping a wave, looked at Theo with sand on both eyebrows and pressed decline. It rang again at 2:16. Declined. 2:17, declined. Mommy, who keeps calling. Theo asked, not looking up from his hole. Nobody important right now, I said, and slid the phone to the bottom of the beach bag, screen down. Let's go look for dolphins. He dropped the shovel and ran for the water. I followed him in. The phone buzzed against the bottom of that bag 22 more times over the next hour. I didn't answer a single one. I want to be clear about something. I wasn't angry, and I wasn't making a point. I was standing in the ocean holding my son's hand while he scanned the horizon for a fin, and that, very simply, mattered more than whatever was unraveling in a parking lot 200 miles away. Back at the resort, the same 22 calls went unanswered, and Carmen, by every account, lost it completely. Not the quiet kind of angry, the kind that clears a room. She did this on purpose, she said to the clerk, voice bouncing off marble and high ceilings, and the tasteful watercolor paintings of shorebirds nobody was looking at anymore. She's vindictive. The clerk kept her face admirably neutral. Ma'am, I'll need you to lower your voice. A man in a golf shirt pulled his kids closer. A woman with a roller bag stopped mid-step to stare. Sophie stood near a potted plant, crying quietly, the embarrassed kind of crying a 10-year-old does when she understands her mother is making a scene and there is nothing in the world she can do to stop it. Dylan tugged on our mother's sleeve. Grandma, I want to go. Carmen tried Brandon. No answer. Tried again, voicemail. A man in a navy blazer appeared, calm, apologetic, and asked them to step outside. So they did, all four of them, past the valet stand, into a parking lot that had been freshly paved and was currently somewhere north of 95 degrees, heat rising off the asphalt in waves you could actually watch move. My mother lowered herself onto a concrete bench near the handicap spaces. She looked, in that moment, 10 years older than she was. Her purse sat heavy in her lap, the useless debit card inside it, her own wallet lighter by $600, her phone showing 22 unanswered calls in a neat, unbroken column. Who's paying for this? She said, to no one in particular, not accusing, just tired. Carmen paced beside the SUV. Renata was supposed too. Renata didn't agree to anything. My mother said the first time in years I'd hear she'd actually cut Carmen off mid-sentence. I asked her. She said no. You told me she'd never even notice. Carmen stopped packing. You went along with this, my mother said, quieter now, because Carmen said she'd stop bringing the kids around if I didn't. And there it was, the whole truth of it, finally spoken out loud, not in a courtroom or a family meeting, but in a resort parking lot in 95-degree heat, with the sound of strangers' children splashing in a pool on the other side of a fence. Sophie and Dylan sat in the back of the SUV with the doors open, eating crackers my mother had bought them at a gas station on the way in. Sophie ate hers slowly. Dylan didn't touch his. I want to go home, Sophie said. Dylan looked at my mother through the open door. I want Aunt Renata. Carmen spun around. Don't say her name. Dylan flinched. My mother closed her eyes. Nobody moved for a full minute. The 4-hour drive home happened, by every account, in almost total silence for the first hour, just highway noise and air conditioning turned too cold, the way it gets when one person in the car is furious, and blasting the AC like the heat is somehow everyone else's fault. Sophie played a game on my mother's phone in the back. Dylan fell asleep against the window with his stuffed dinosaur tucked under his chin. Somewhere around an exit neither of them would remember the number of, Sophie stopped playing her game. She'd opened a photo app instead, and she turned the screen toward my mother. Grandma, look, Mia and Theo are at the beach. The photo was simple, my 2 kids kneeling beside a lopsided sandcastle, Theo's goggles pushed up on his forehead, Mia squinting and grinning, both of them sandy to the elbow. I'd posted it an hour earlier with a caption that took me exactly 4 seconds to write. Beach day with my 2 favorites. My mother stared at the screen, her grandchildren laughing on a beach without her, and handed the phone back without saying anything at all. 40 minutes later, Dylan woke up, rubbed his eyes, and looked out at the pine trees blurring past. Mom, are Mia and Theo at the beach? Why couldn't we go with them? The car went quiet again, And I think about that moment more than almost any other piece of this story. Carmen's own son, completely unprompted, asking the exact question her own words had planted weeks earlier in my mother's kitchen. Your kids aren't coming. Mine don't want them there. Now it was Dylan, asking why he hadn't got to go with them, and there was no good answer in that car, because the truth wasn't something Carmen could say out loud to a 5-year-old. My mother turned in her seat. Carmen, what have we done? Don't start, Mom. That night on our own stretch of sand, the sky went through every color it knows how to turn, peach, then copper, then a deep bruised purple that made the water look like poured metal. I sat with my back against the dune wall, Mia asleep across my lap, hair still damp, a streak of sand drying on her cheek. Theo was 20 feet away, still digging, this particular hole apparently designed to be a trap for crabs. No crabs had taken the bait. I finally pulled out my phone. 22 missed calls from my mother, 14 from Carmen, 3 voicemails. I played the first one. My mother's voice came through cracked and hoarse. Renata, the trip fell apart. We drove all that way for nothing. Carmen is beside herself. The deposit's gone. Please call me back, please. 38 seconds. I let it play all the way through, then set the phone back in the bag and zipped it shut. I didn't call back that night. Not because I wanted them to keep suffering, and not to prove a point. There was nothing I could say that would undo what had already been planned, and nothing they could say that would undo how it had been built. Some conversations need to happen when both people are actually ready, not on a deadline somebody else set. I wasn't ready yet. Mommy, I found a shell. Theo ran up, fist raised like a trophy, and opened his hand to show me half a sand dollar, broken clean down the middle. Is it still good if it's broken? I turned it over in my palm. The best ones usually are, buddy. He grinned and ran back to his crab trap. I looked out at the water and thought about a letter folded behind my license, 7 sentences in block capital letters. Take your bobbies to the beach. I had. We came home tan and tired, and for the first time in longer than I could easily remember, actually happy. Theo told Dr. Acaffer about the dolphin he'd seen before he'd even clocked in Monday morning, holding his arms out to demonstrate the distance, which in the retelling kept shrinking from 10 feet to about 10 inches. Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang in the clinic parking lot. Mom. I turned the key back so the radio went quiet and answered. Can we talk? She said. I want to apologize. You can talk, I'm listening. I shouldn't have let Carmen decide everything. And the card, I didn't know she'd try to charge that much. But you knew she was going to charge asterisk something. Silence. A crow landed on the dumpster across the lot, then took off again. Mom, I love you, but from now on, my finances are mine. No shared accounts, no cards left at your house, no emergency access. You want to see Mia and Theo, you're welcome any Sunday. But I'm not funding plans I'm not part of. I heard her breathing, shallow, not crying, just absorbing it, maybe for the first time actually absorbing it. Okay, she said quietly. And Mom, I'm not angry. I'm just done being the wallet. She let that sit a moment. I understand, she said, though I don't think she fully did yet. Understanding isn't a switch you flip. It's slower than that, water finding a groove in stone over years, not weeks. We said goodbye. I went back inside, fed the clinic cat her 3:30 meal, finished the monthly report, and picked my kids up at 5:15, same as always. Carmen didn't call. Not that week. Not the next. 2 full weeks of silence, which was its own kind of answer, and one I didn't mind sitting in. My mother mentioned it once, almost in passing. Carmen says she'll never forgive you for ruining the trip. I was folding laundry, phone on speaker, Theo lining up toy cars on the coffee table beside me. She'll have to forgive herself first, I said, and my mother didn't have anything to say back to that. 3 weeks after the resort, the town held its usual summer potluck, paper plates, folding tables, pulled pork, and too many casseroles. I walked in with Mia and Theo and a bowl of potato salad. Carmen was across the room near the dessert table. Our eyes met for half a second, hers slid away first. No confrontation, no speech. Life isn't a courtroom most days. Sometimes you just stand on opposite ends of a community center and eat the same barbecue. Sophie broke away from her mother's table and ran over. Aunt Renata, can Mia come play? Whatever Carmen had told her daughter about asterisk real, family clearly hadn't stuck the way she'd hoped. Of course, sweetie, anytime. Sophie grabbed Mia's hand, and the two of them disappeared toward the playground, laughing about something already forgotten by the time they reached the swings. Carmen watched from across the room, said nothing, and left before the pie was served. I stayed, ate my potato salad, talked to Ruth about a leak in the clinic roof, drove home, gave Theo his bath, read Mia 2 chapters, and went to bed on what was, by every honest measure, just a normal Tuesday, which, by then, felt like the rarest and best kind of night I could ask for. If someone needs your bank card to keep you inside the family, here's what I've come to believe. You were never actually in it. You were just funding it, and there's a difference between those two things that takes most people years to see clearly. A letter from an electrician who knew exactly what each of his daughters was capable of. 22 unanswered calls. A sand dollar, broken clean in half, that turned out to still be good. That's where I'll leave this one. If you've ever had to move your money just to move on with your life, or told someone no after years of automatically saying yes, share this with whoever needs to hear it today. Comment your story below. I read every single one. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next.